So most of you don't know who I am. I'm a relative newcomer to this talk scene thing. My name is Sony, and I'm a mobile developer here in the Twin Cities. I work for an amazing company, consulting company named STG, and there's a website there. We're always looking for talented people, so just to wrap them a little bit, visit their website and see what we have to offer. So this talk is an introduction to Chrome developer tools. Hopefully most of you have heard of DevTools. This is a JS conference after all, right? But just in case, so Google makes this Chrome browser, obviously, and with it comes a built-in extension named Chrome Developer Tools. So use the browser, obviously, to view web pages. You can use Chrome Developer Tools to kind of take a look at how these web pages function, right? You can use Chrome Developer Tools to see, for example, what JavaScript libraries the web page is using, what kind of network requests are being made in the browser, and maybe even the CSS and the styles and the HTML structure of the web page, right? So a lot of people think of Chrome Developer Tools as typically just a debugger, right? Something breaks, some JavaScript error is thrown in the console, and your page is not rendered. That's the time when you reach for the debugger to turn on and see how to fix that issue, right? So in this talk, I'm kind of going to try to convince you, if not already convinced, that maybe we can integrate Chrome Developer Tools into our development workflow sooner in our workflow, rather than grabbing it and then we have to debug something, right? So in order to set the context of this talk, I'm going to propose that we work on an application that already exists. It already exists for this talk. So the application is Movie Box Office. And it's going to display, or already displays, the top 10 grossing movies this week. Okay? And by going through this application, we can kind of exercise different features of Chrome Developer Tools. But the wireframe for this web application shows us that we have to display some kind of card layout or grid layout for our movie posters, and the title and the year that the movie was released. Okay? So I've already built out this application, a base application, and the backend is already taken care of. It's just this Java Spring MVC application, and so we don't have to worry about that part. But we do have to worry about building out the front end for this talk. Okay, so we're going to have to add new features to this application and see how we can use Chrome to help us along the way. So we can take a look at the source code right now. I have my IDE open. So we have 3 files to worry about for this talk. We have our index.jsp file, which is a root document, and which has a link to our main CSS, which is the second of the 3 files, and has a link to our main.js file, which is the last of our files. And in this root document, we have some header stuff, and we have some content stuff for our movie list, right? And this movie list is just an unordered list, has some list items, and each list item has the movie title, the year, and the image JPEG for the poster, right? And this just repeats 10 times. This is basically a static web page, right? And notice that in these list item elements, we have a data attribute for movie ID. So these are just our unique IDs for each movie. And we may be using this later on to grab more data about the movie, right? And the other files are main CSS. There's some styling of already going on, right? And there's no JavaScript in our code yet, okay? So let's go to the website and see how it looks. Okay? So I've actually just scraped Rotten Tomatoes website. And a different version of this talk, I actually hit the live API of Rotten Tomatoes. But I attempted Fig once and I came out live. I'm not going to attempt it today. So I locked out the service, some similar service here. So notice that the title's here, and there's some posters. Let me minimize that so you can see more of it. Decrease size. So these are our posters for our movies, right? But obviously, it doesn't match our wireframes, right? So it's a single column layout. So let's say we wanted to make this change to our style sheet to make this page look more like our wireframes. The first inclination that most of us have is to go back to that IDE, right? Go back to the source file, make those changes to that style sheet, and then if you're working in a Java ecosystem or a system like it, you're going to have to wait for that build process to trigger. And you're going to have to wait for that deploy process to trigger. So you can deploy your whatever Word file to your Tomcat or application container, right? So that's kind of a tedious process for like a small CSS change that we want to make, right? So obviously I'm going to tell you there's an alternative, and that is to let's use Chrome developer tools to kind of make the change. Okay? And the first thing I'm going to show you in Chrome developer tools is the elements panel. By the way, in my slides, I like to use irrelevant pictures in it just to break up a little bit. They are the elementals, though. So, Chrome Developer Tools has, when you open it up for the first time, the Elements panel. And the Elements panel shows you a list of, or shows you a view of your document object tree, right? And it shows you some styles that are applied to those elements. But rather than have me describe it, let's go open it up and take a look at the Chrome Developer Tools panel, Elements panel. So, I can right-click on the page, as long as it's not right-clicking over some kind of plugin, like Flash or Java. I can get a inspect element and a menu item here. All I have to do is click on it, and Chrome Developer Tools opens up. And this is the Elements panel, right? I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this panel. So the Elements panel has subpanes for our document object model tree, right? So we're actually looking at our live DOM, right? So this is kind of the structure of our HTML, and I can move my mouse over it, and Chrome overlays the rendered item on the page to tell me where my mouse is at, right? And I can actually open up the tree and traverse the tree and look at what child elements are within each HTML element, right? And I can actually play around with this, and I can move things around here. Let's move Guardians of the Galaxy to number 1 where it should be, right? Right. Yeah. Right. And so that's cool. It can also do a lot of other stuff, which if I have a workshop, I could do and talk about. But so we'll move on to the styles editor, right? So as I move my mouse and I click my mouse onto each element, I can see the styles change for that element. Right? So the styles editor is telling us this is the styles that are being applied to that element. So this is styles editor down here. All right. So I can look at the inline style for this element, Guardians of the Galaxy, and I can change these styles, right? I can actually add new styles. I can play around with this. This item. I can say let's play around with the transforms. Okay, so I can make changes to these list items, and I can get immediate feedback. I can see what's happening when I apply these changes, and then I can make decisions on what to do next, depending on the change. Okay, and if you're working with a lot of images, like sprites or things like that, and you're trying to find positions for where the image on the sprite is, this is kind of cool. You can go through and change CSS and try to figure out where this button is, or this image is, where I can apply a background to a div element or something like that. So notice that in the DOM, we see an inline style being applied to this item element. Right? So I can remove this, delete it, or I'll copy it. And so moving down this styles editor, I can apply styles to different selectors, right? So down here you see .movie list li. So this selector actually applies a style to all the li elements, right, within the movie list. So I can actually put this style in here. Whoops. Forgot a dash. And now I can change the styles for all the list items, right? And the cool thing about the styles editor is that any numeric value you can change with your up and down arrow keys, right? So let's say I don't like 45 degrees. Let's make it something else, right? I can play around with this all day. It's kind of fun, actually. I can press hold shift, and press the up and down arrow keys. Go a little faster, multiples of 10, or multiples of 110, right? So that's kind of cool. Another cool thing about the styles editor is there's a color picker, right? I don't have to keep typing my RGB values or hex values. I just click the color picker and find something that looks red. And since this CSS styles apply to all li elements, all my li list item elements where the cursors change, right? That's kind of cool. And moving down here, you see other styles. And notice that on the right of this style, I have a link to a main CSS line 43. So Chrome Developer Tools is telling us that this style comes from a source file on line 43, right? So that's cool. And as I move down, you see other styles being applied some are overridden by some other styles from different areas. So you see user agent style sheet. That's the browser's default style. That's usually overridden if you're using VSET CSS or normalized CSS, right? That's the point of those libraries, is to actually override the default browser style and give you the same starting point for all browsers. So I'm actually going to move on from here. Okay. So how do we fix that issue with so one thing is when you refresh the page, these changes go away. Right? Okay. So if I make the change to this layout to fix it, let's go back to allows. To fix it to make it look like a card layout, my changes won't stick. Right? Does anyone know what change I have to make this the card layout? Oops. In my block. Right. That's kind of cool. So one change fixes that, but as soon as I refresh, it goes away, unfortunately. So that's for our next topic. We're kind of figure out what feature of Chrome can allow us to persist these changes. So actually, Chrome can actually make changes to your file system, right? So the next topic is sources. Okay, I'm curious if anyone can actually tell where the source code snippet comes from. It'd be amazing if you guys could figure it out. So it actually comes from jQuery. It looks pretty complicated in a lot of libraries as well, so it'd be hard to figure out. So the sources panel is basically your text editor in Chrome Developer Tools. Right? So you can actually open files, resource files in Chrome Developer Tools, edit them. You can try to save them, but I didn't show you how to do it yet, but you can do it. And you can debug stuff in the sources panel. Right? So let's take a look at what that looks like. So we're back in the Elements panel. In order to get to the Sources panel, we can click on the Sources panel tab here. Or notice that this link for the CSS I just changed takes us to line 43 where we want to make that change to the CSS. So clicking on that takes me to the Sources panel. Right? And now I can modify all the CSS for my movie web page. Okay? So I can do the same modification I did in the Styles editor. I can do it here. I can also use my up arrow keys to kind of change stuff around. Right? Only bad thing is I don't think you can do a color picker again. So yeah, so if I hit Control S, it saves it, but it's not saving to the file system. So how do we rectify this? So refresh goes back to normal. So there's another feature of Chrome Developer Tools called workspaces. Yeah.
The changes in the styles panel, like elements view,
yep.
And you switch over to sources. With those changes you made there?
There should be. So if I make a change here, I think it should be. So they are displayed in my block. Yep. Cool.
How do you get on your phone? Right.
Say that again?
Your developer the source code, get default file.
Oh yeah, so there's a option here to click on dock to the bottom, dock to the right. Right. I usually actually have it using dock to the bottom, but for this presentation, with such a bad resolution, I have to dock it to the right. Okay. Alright, so we made these changes. We can't persist these changes yet. It'd be nice if we could. So I think last year, a year and a half ago, Developer Tools introduced this notion of a workspace. Alright, so I click on my little button here for the navigator, and I can see all the source files for this website. I'm being served by localhost 8080. That's my box, and I can see my scripts type, my styling, CSS type, my script file, and my CSS file. Right? But you can also add a workspace to this navigator. Right? I'm just telling Chrome, so right click on this space here, and click on Add Folder to Workspace. Right? So now I'm just telling Chrome, okay, link to a folder on my file system. Right? So I go to my file system where my sources are located. Different movies. Right? I click open. And now Chrome is going to ask me, are you sure? Why not? Right? So now you see a folder in here. Basically, you're using this as like a folder manager for this single folder. And you can actually look at the files in this folder that have nothing to do with your UI, but you can still open them nonetheless, if they're text files. And you can see your source files in here. Right? There's my scripts file and my style sheet file, right? And some index.jsp stuff. So right now, if I click on main CSS, it opens up another main CSS. That's a little confusing, right? There's two main CSSs now. One is served from the remote server, and one is actually on my file system. Let's close the one on the server. Okay. So now, if I make changes to this main CSS from my workspace, what's actually going to happen? Obviously, I just spoiled it fun. It saves the file to the file system, but you don't get the immediate feedback. You don't get Chrome changing the styles for the DOM elements, right? We have to take one more step where we can link these workspaces to our remote files. So let me close this. I just right-click on one of my CSS files, and I say map to network resource. So I click on that, and now Chrome is going to ask me if you want to map it to main CSS. It's trying to be smart and find a remote file in main CSS. Right? And it says localhost 8080 down here. I'll say sure. Okay, it's going to ask me if I'm going to restart. Sure. So now something disappeared, right? Our remote files have disappeared, and Chrome is only showing us one folder, our workspace. And it was trying to be smart. It actually mapped all the other files in our source folder to the remote files, like my JS file. My JSP file maps to our index file of my root document. And so if I click on this, all I see is index.jsp, and in resources folder, my scripts, I see main JS file, and a main CSS file here, right? So now, let's see if I make any changes to this, if it actually gives me some immediate feedback. Right? So let's fix our display issue. Oops, I'm not blocked. Okay. I can Control S to save it. Right, so immediate feedback. And if I actually refresh the page, my build process should have finished by now, and it should have stuck. Right, so that's kind of cool. So now you can get that immediate feedback of making changes to your UI, your files, and also persist it to the file system. I didn't have to leave Chrome to go to my IDE and make these changes. I'm still in this one screen, right? So I have to context switch. Okay. All right. So that to recap, we went over the elements panel. I went over the sources panel, and we kind of showed how we can link the workspace in the sources panel to our remote file. Right. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is console. Right. Did anyone actually have this console when they were younger? I have one. It's kind of cool. It's from the 80s, I think. So the console. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the console panel. So the console panel is kind of like this awesome, versatile, multi-use tool in Chrome. You can execute expressions, JavaScript code in the console. You can inspect DOM elements. Right? So you can use it everywhere. And let's take a look at how it functions. So here's the console panel. So it's actually just a button, right? A read eval print loop. So basically you can type in expressions. Right? You can create variables and print it back. You can actually define functions, right? Okay. And I can call the function the value 10. And all I did was just, whoops.
Return test instead of R.
sorry. I have a fun of live coding. Alright. Okay, cool. So you can also open this panel in different parts of our Chrome Developer Tools. So I can go to the Elements panel, I'm going to press Escape, and I can open up the console there. Alright. And the cool thing here is that whenever I click on the DOM element, I can reference that DOM element with $0. Right? So if I want to use that in some of my code, if I want to write a function that prints out something or handles this element, I can just click on something and use that variable. Right? And there's actually $1, $2, $3 for the previous elements you've clicked on. Right? And it doesn't stop there. Right? So this tool is amazing. I can do a jQuery type selector on stuff. So if I want the body tag, right, and get the body, I can look for the double dollar selector, which is that. So these selectors are actually mapped to JavaScript functions on the document object. So there's a document.query selector and a document.query selector all, right? So I can use the query selector all for all my LI elements. Oops. And now I've got a collection of list items I can play around with, pass through some functions I'm using. And I can click on this and I can explore it from here as well as the elements panel. Okay? So I'll revisit the console panel if I have time later to show some more stuff. Okay? Alright. Let's go back 2 slides. Alright, so ignoring the application for a little bit. So let's say some new requirements come down. We got a story that says, I want people to click on a poster and get synopsis information for the movie. Alright? I want to display some information for the movie Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that. And I want it to be a modal dialogue. And I want to have the user be able to close the window or the modal dialogue. Alright? So there are 2 main tasks we have to do to get this done. First is to actually design the UI, develop the UI, apply some styles to it so it looks like a modal dialogue. And the second main task is to actually write the JavaScript code to handle the data. Right? So the second task is going to be more involved. We have to write AJAX requests to get some JSON data. We have to parse it, and then we have to render it into this dialogue. Right? So let's see how we can tackle the first task of trying to develop this UI. Right? And we're going to use Chrome to do it. Okay? So we go back to our sources panel, and we'll click on our index.jsp file. So now this is linked to the file system. If I make changes here, it will persist. Okay? So let's create a modal dialog. Right? The first thing you need is an overlay. And let's apply a style for overlays. Okay. And within this overlay, we need kind of the actual modal dialog. Okay. So let's give it a. I'm simply looking at those. How about on the side? I don't even know if this is semantically correct. So let's give it a class of synopsis. Right? And then here, maybe we're going to display the actual text of our synopsis. Right? Let's do a p tag. And we're going to stub this out right now. Okay. All right. How about we also deal with the movie title just in case? All right. And we're done to close it. Unfortunately, the thing about Chrome Developer Tools, when you're editing your JSP files, it does not give you the immediate feedback that you're thinking. So we could have edited this DOM tree live in here, which you can do with edit HTML. So that would have given us a live change. right? But it doesn't persist. By adding the source file here, it does persist, but we lose that immediate feedback. Maybe sometime in the future, Chrome DevTools will actually integrate this with our DOM, and it'd be cool to see that change happen. So I saved it, and while talking, I hope that the build is finished. If we refresh this page, we should see something unstyled at the bottom. Maybe channel synopsis, close button. Alright? So let's use Chrome Developer Tools to add some styles to this. Let's go to our main CSS. Alright? So we added an overlay, and we gave it an overlay class, right? Over the style class. So dot overlay style. Alright? So let's move this up so you can see. Can you guys see okay? Okay. Let's give it a background color. I think there's a theme going on where we do pink. I think Jeff did pink as a color. I'll try that. And let's give it a position of, who knows, fixed. So it doesn't scroll with the page. Top, 0, left, 0. How about we give it a height, 100%. How about we give it a width of 100%. Cool. So now we've got this overlay on the screen, and it's beautifully pink. So let's see if we can go into our elements panel and play with the color picker. Right? So close that. And open up the styles editor. So I can right click on this element and I can inspect it. And I get the style for this overlay. And there's pink. So let's change it to something better. A darker color maybe. How about that? Okay. Now how about we give it some opacity, right? Let's change it from RGB to RGBA, right? And give it opacity of 0.3. How about we increase that? That looks suitable. Okay, so now we've styled the overlay. We still have this box here for our dialog. Let's style that. Alright, so let's go to our sources panel and take a look at how we style this. So we added a synopsis class to this HTML element, so you can see it here, actually. Right there. So let's add some CSS to this class. Okay. So we have a synopsis class. Okay. Let's give it a background color of, I don't know, blue. Cool. How about we give it a display of inline block? And I'll tell you the reason why. So I gave it inline block so that we can actually center this element within our panel, within our overlay. So if I do a text line, now we're centered. Alright? I think inline block is like the most amazing thing in HTML. So, in CSS. So how about we give it a width too? 400 pixels sounds good. And it seems to be the contents of this element are kind of butting up against the edges, right? So how about we give it some padding? 10 pixels, not 110. And add some margin. Top. 10%. Okay, cool. So now we have a UI, and we've done it all through Chrome, right? And this is persisting, and we saw how we could build it and see immediate feedback, right? And I can make changes depending on how it looked. Alright? So this kind of reminds you of something in the 90s, the late 90s. Remember HTML WYSIWYG editors? I don't mind using those. Those are actually pretty cool. So I think it's heading towards that direction again. The Google's backing it, so it has to be cool. So, alright, so now that we have our UI, one thing is always going to display on the page. So let's add a hide class. And I don't think we display, well, right. So I have to go in here. So I want to see this immediate feedback. I don't want to modify the JSP just yet, because I have to refresh the page. I can go in here and I can add another class in here. Alright. So I'll have to modify the JSP now and add the hide class in here. Okay. So now we've got that all set up. Alright, so we're done with task 1, which was to add this little box here. And so our second task is to add our JavaScript logic to kind of populate this box with some data. Okay? So, the next thing I'm going to talk about is snippets. So this is a really great tool in web developer. So you can actually run arbitrary code in your browser anytime you want. Right? It sounds like running a virus, but you're actually running your own code anyways, and it's your own browser. So it's your fault if you run something bad. Right? So snippets, let's take a look at it. So we can use snippets to actually experiment with different kinds of JavaScript functions. You can write it on the fly, execute it, and see how it interacts with your page. Right? So if you can actually go to GitHub, production website. And the reason why I say not GitHub is because GitHub actually blocks you from executing certain types of code. You go to a website that's in production. You have libraries that are being used on the website, but you can actually add code and download new scripts and inject it into the page and see how that code works with the production code. Right? So let's see how that works with snippets. So I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to add in the sources panel. Open up a navigator, and there's a subtab here called snippets. Right? So I already have some stuff in here already. Let me close out these elements. Right? So you can create new snippets. You can save them. You can rename them. You can delete them, and they're all saved to your user home directory on your local machine. So when you close the browser and open it, you can see the snippets again. So right now I have a test snippet in here, and I'm going to tell you what this does. Right? Actually, it's pretty obvious, I think. It's creating a script tag in the head of the page and downloading it, the script, injecting it into a page dynamically. So I can actually go into a production site and see how my library and someone else's library works with the current production site. So for example, this is actually downloading the Q promises library and injecting it into the page. So right now I'm going to try to see what's in window object, or window.q, or just Q. So we have no reference to the Q library as of yet. But as soon as I execute this by right-clicking on my test snippet, oops. Oh crap, I forgot I have to do. Okay, just take my word for it. Q is going to be injected, and Q is going to, you're going to see the Q object in here, right? But we can run any kind of code in here. So for example, our code to get this analysis data, right? We can experiment with how that works. So I've already written this out to save some time. So we close this. So get synopsis, right? So we can write out some get synopsis code. We can play around with this AJAX request to see what kind of response we get back. And once we're content with our function, then we can move it into the main.js code. Right? So this code actually hits the web service to get my movie synopsis data for a specific movie ID. Right? And then the onload, I'm not handling any errors. I'm just saying, okay, it's always going to be a success. And I'm going to print out the synopsis response. Right? So it's parsing it with JSON parse to give me a JavaScript object. Right? So to run this code, all I have to do is Control Enter or right-click on it and execute it or run. Okay? So now this code created a global function, or actually a function, a property on the window object called get synopsis. So that exists now. Right? And if I click Enter, I can see the value of that in the console. I can call it. So get synopsis. Right? But what do I call it with? Right? Our movie ID, remember we had a unique ID for each movie item. So if we go back to our elements panel, you can actually see that in here. Okay? Data attribute. Right? So let's take number 2. I think that's Guardians of the Galaxy. And let's actually make a request to my local box, which is not, doesn't need require internet, and we should get data back. So we'll go back to the sources panel, and I do it, and I type in 2, let's get some data back. Alright? So now in this return, or this response, I'm actually printing to the console. And in the console, I can play around with this object in here and see that, oh, I have JSON data that's telling me this is a movie synopsis, and this is a movie title. And I can take this data and then render it onto my page. Right? So as we move along, actually, are there any questions before I go to the next thing? Okay, so now we've got an AJAX function written, and we want to experiment with how we want to render the page, or render this data. So we're going to go, just imagine that we're just playing around with snippets, and we code up this function called render. Right? So render takes the synopsis object, which is what we returned, or we got back from our AJAX request, and then renders it into our dialog box. Okay. So to call this function, I have to execute this and add this property to the window object. Okay. So if I do window dot render, or just render actually, it should appear in the console. All right. So we've added this function to our web page, and we want to run it. So render what? What are we going to render? We can mock out this data that we're going to pass into the render function. But chances are you're looking at large applications, and the JSON does not just have one property in it or two properties in it. You have like maybe 500 kilobytes or something. Who knows, right? So what we do is we can go back to our console log. We print it out. We can right click on this object here and say store as global variable. Right? So now I've got a temp1 variable created for me, and then all I have to do is pass it into this function, and it should work. Right? Actually, let's print out the temp1 to show you what it is. Same object, right? But now we have access to this variable, and we can use it in our functions in the console. Cool, something happened. Oh, that's ugly, but it worked. So we're rendering all this data for Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Actually, I don't know what that looks. There. Read the text. Okay. So that's cool. So now we're using the snippets panel to kind of play around with functions we might want to put into our main.js file. Alright? So right now I've just executed this manually. We don't have time to go through all the code, but there's going to be code to close this box and code to click on the poster. So what I'm going to do now, before I move on to the next topic, is just put that code in place. Okay? So I'm just going to copy that. And copy it into my main.js file here. Persist it. Right? And now wait a few seconds for the build process to take into effect. And when I refresh the page, all my code will be there. And we can actually run it and see this feature in action. So let me close this for now. Refresh. So if I click on this, I get JSON data for the synopsis data for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Lucy, and so on. Okay? So that is the snippets, and I find it really useful to play around with some new code. And there's a lot of people out there who are actually keeping repositories of different snippets you can run on different pages. Like, for example, if you're watching some videos on YouTube or something like that, I think there's a snippet out there that just strips out everything else but the YouTube video, so you don't have to be distracted by things you're watching. Or not watching. Okay, so the next topic, if I have time, is debugger. I know it's a little cliche to add XKCD comments to slides, but I just couldn't resist. They're just too funny and then related to what we're talking about. So hopefully everyone here has actually used the debugger from Chrome Developer Tools before. It's probably the thing you do most in Chrome Developer Tools, right? Debug problems. So debugger, that obviously it gives you ability to stop execution of your code. You can pause it, you can inspect your variables, your scope, what variables are in there. So let's see how that works. But I'm actually not going to go into Chrome right now. I'm going to go into my source file again. So this is the last time I'm going to look at the source file. I think it's only the second time this time I looked at it. I'm going to go into my main.js file here. And I'm going to stick in a keyword that I think is really useful. And I'm going to put it right here. And it's going to be the word debugger. Alright? So let's wait for that build process to take effect, a few seconds. And then go back to our source code and see what happens. Okay. We'll open up Chrome Developer Tools. Okay. Mismatch means our build's not done yet. Cool. We'll run this stuff. What is this? Done. So let's click on the page. So I've added the debugger keyword here in the render function. So when I click on the page, the JSON comes back, and then it gets rendered onto the page. When the render function gets called, it should break right here, right? Cool. So I find this really, really useful. So I'm working with a lot of code bases most of the time. Code bases that are really large. So these are hundreds of JavaScript files. And I may be editing a JavaScript file that's concatenated, amplified, and served into the browser, right? And so how do I know where to put a breakpoint when I'm in a production system or a system or a dev server that's already minified and compacted all my JavaScript? I just stick debug points, debugger keyword in my source file, and then Chrome will actually stop right there. And now I can inspect any variables that are in this function, right, in this code. I can see all my local variables. Okay. I can see my call stack. So let's go back to one step, one call. I can see that when I got the synopsis actually actually rendered my data. And I can see other stuff. I can step through these things. I'm sure all of you know how to use a debugger. So I think the last thing I'm going to talk about is how we do recompilation. So let's say I've stepped through this code, and I already know at this point, maybe I just found out at this point, something's wrong with this code. So how can I make this work without tripping the old code? All I have to do is actually just modify stuff. So instead of printing movie ID, I can print something new. Right? I hit Control S, save it, and in my console, it will tell me that recompilation update succeeded. So now, it's built in the same spot, but when I click play, it should execute Sony's ID. Right? So now you can multi-patch your code on the fly, right? So if you're in a spot where you know your code's a little broken, or you know that if you experiment with different values and Control S it and save it, you can kind of get the right output. Right? So that's kind of a neat feature in Chrome developer tools. Right? Okay. So are there any questions? Yep. I think that's all I have time for to talk about. So I'll just take some final questions. Actually, I have one bit of advice, since we have like 2 minutes. Let's say you guys are working with your colleagues, and you're working on a bug that you spent 2 weeks trying to fix this bug, and you fixed it, you pushed it, your repo, but no one else can see that it works, right? And you're like scratching your head, you spend a few hours working on it, and then you come to find out that your colleagues didn't clear their cache, right? And it seems like clearing your cache, I hear that so much. It probably should be on a t-shirt or something. So a really awesome feature I always turn on, I press F1 in developer tools, and I tell everybody to click on this, checkbox it, disable your cache, and then all your bugs are fixed. So everything magically works. And that's my last bit of advice for this talk. So, are there any questions?
So when you were doing the snippets, you made a copy and pasted that into the file. So is there a way to just like click a snippet?
Unfortunately, you can't. So I just have to copy and paste it. Yeah. Yep.
So if you're in there, you can JavaScript, you won't be able to
Right. So if you're on a production system, right, and you're opening the debugger to debug something, and that source file that you're looking at is all concatenated and minified, you can do 2 things. There's this option in Chrome in Source Panel where you can prettify your source code. So if I go to sources, decrease this. Source. Actually, Control O should open it. You can actually, what is missing here? There's a little option here. Oh, sorry, I got closed. Usually it shows up, there's an icon for 2 curly braces. You click on it and minified code becomes prettified. Though this still doesn't look as nice as normal source code, you still see the variable names all screwed up, obfuscated. So that's one option to debug that kind of code. Another option is to use this thing called source maps. And so if you visit jQuery's website, I think a lot of libraries are doing these days, when they build their source file, they actually output a source map that tells us how the minified file matches to the actual source file. And you can actually use Chrome to grab that source map and use it to map your modified code, right? And then you can debug it better, so you can see the actual source. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so thank you all for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the talk.